Okay, everybody, welcome. Good evening, and this being Monday, May 8th, 6 p.m., we will start the Ways and Means Committee meeting. And as we normally do, I'd like to ask you to join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if you would just stand for a moment of silence for all of those who serve in our armed forces, abroad and at home, and all of those who have served and provided us as a nation the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you. Please have a seat. Clerk Semino, if you would please start with the roll call.
Councilor Reynolds?
Here.
Councilor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilor Maglio is presently not in attendance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have no approval of minutes this evening, nor do we have any old business to cover. So we will kick into our new business. And new business is a budget review schedule. And is there a motion to take this off of the table, order 23025?
Motion to take off the table order 23025.
And I will step down as chair and second that motion. Clerk Semino, roll call, or I should say, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We've taken care of that business. And first up on tonight's mayor's budget, we will be reviewing the town clerk. So, council, or I should say Clerk Casey, welcome this evening.
Thank you, members, for asking me here this evening. I'm going to give you a little overview of my department, and then we can discuss each of the line items based on your preference. The town clerk serves as the chief election official, chief public access officer, chairperson of the License Commission, the official record keeper for the town, along with many other roles and responsibilities mandated by Mass General law or by charter. On a day-to-day basis, the town clerk is supported by a team of professional and knowledgeable staff members led by Assistant Town Clerk Debbie Starr and two principal clerks, Jane DeOria and Eric Coca. Staff members are required to be versed across a broad range of Mass General laws and wear many hats to provide the umbrella of services offered to the public each day. For fiscal 2024, I am requesting a 24.2 budget increase over fiscal year 2023 to fund services that have been negatively impacted due to the previous year budget cuts, to comply with the Voter Act of 2022, adopted by our state legislators, and to fund a third election for 2024. I thank members for of the committee for the opportunity to discuss my budget before them. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Before we move on, I just want to recognize we have been joined by Councilor Maglio. Give us a full quorum.
Thank you.
Hi. That's right. So I just want to also just give an opportunity to the Chief of Staff, LaForest, if she has anything she'd like to add before we ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make note about a follow-up from your question of the previous evening. You had asked, we're reviewing the general fund revenue budget about the Integra project, and and I had myself some confusion whether the planning board decision or the permit decision. The team had a meeting with the full Integra team with all of the department heads for as they're preparing to issue the permit. They currently are working on the fire suppression tie-in, whether it's going to be to the pond on Wood Road or to the municipal water line. They've been working diligently with DPW. There is a connection for the pond to the water line. As soon as their fire suppression logistics are worked out, that permit will be issued. And so we are anticipating about a $750,000 permit fee for that. So it's imminent, and they are diligently working on that. So I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Thank you, that's very helpful, really appreciate that. That gives us a little more insight and certainly a higher level of confidence that this thing is moving forward as expected.
And then to that note, there is a second tenant. I don't have the tenant's name, but we've requested that in a meeting in the mayor's office with this second tenant. So whether the lease is signed or where that stands, we've reached out to Hilco to make sure we're up to date on that as well. It was referenced in the meeting, but not, we haven't had that, they have not met the tenant in the mayor's office yet. So that's also being scheduled. So should be increasing capacity.
Great, and just for a point of clarification, so that second tenant does not apply to the TIF?
So we will see. I believe there was some language in the TIF relative to life science uses receiving that benefit, and I'm not positive the use of the second tenant. So I will get back to you on that as soon as I have this meeting and see what it is, what they'll be doing.
Great,
So,
great. Awesome, thank you.
To be determined.
Thank you. I just want to give my fellow committee members an opportunity to see if they have any questions or comments on that update from the Chief of Staff, and start with Councilor Flaherty.
Just to clarify, is this a conversation that we can have even though it wasn't on the agenda?
It's fine. It's
Okay.
just answering the questions.
So then my question is, does Integra have a sense of when they will be fully occupying the property?
I would say we're a year out of their build-out. And then I should
Yeah.
note that the building permit issuance fee is specific to building. It's not their utility permit fees, which will be on top of that.
Okay. That's my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Maglio, any questions, follow-up?
Yes, thank you. I'm just thinking for people who are watching, when they hear the word TIF, if you could explain the 20-second version of what that is.
Sure. A TIF is a tax increment financing agreement, and as this body knows, the Haemonetics building on Wood Road had been vacant for some time, had been trying to recruit some tenants. I had worked previously in my other role trying to help Braintree attract some tenants to that location, and what we're seeing in the life science industry is, even though you're talking large-scale projects, is attracting them to your community. And an incentive was offered by this body through you and the mayor's office to activate Integra at that location. And so the current taxes that are on the parcel today, as is maintained at 100%. The new taxes that are generated from the increment or the capital expense that they expend to outfit the property, that increased revenue is that new growth we call the increment, was offered at a discount rate. And I believe the schedule for that was 50% over 10 years. So a little for them, but new growth for the town. And then they aligned that with some lease terms, I believe.
Thank you. So in very plain language, there is a certain amount of tax revenue as the way the building is. The company moving in is going to invest, which increases the value of that property.
Correct.
But their tax rate is going to stay at that base level for 10 years.
So, okay, so their current taxes they're paying at a 100% rate. And so, yes, you are correct that you would see a spike as they invest this new growth. It would go up straight this way. And what we're saying is taking out that direct spike and more gradual on the growth. So it is going to increase.
So a gradual increase over the 10 years.
To making them at 10 years, they'll be back to 100% on their base plus the new growth. So 100% on the base.
Yep. Okay. No, that makes sense. It's good for people to know so that, and when you say 100%, that just means the commercial tax rate that exists in the town.
Right. So, okay. You are made whole. The town of Braintree did not lose any money on what they're getting today. That is maintained at 100%. But by saying, well, the property could have no capital expense and exist as is, or we incentivize them to invest money in Braintree, raising that property value, bringing jobs and benefit to the community.
Oh, yeah, we don't need to go through
Okay.
all that. It's important for people to understand what a TIF is, what it stands for,
You get
and
it.
the fact that there is a discount being offered so that when this company moves in maybe a year, when you said the permitting is starting, the clock will start ticking so that they will actually be paying the full share over
Correct.
a period at which will end in 10 years, and then they will be paying the full share,
Correct.
not a discount. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Okay, so back to, and now that we've taken, that information has been clarified, we do thank you, and we'll move back on to the subject matter at hand on schedule, and that is questions for the town clerk as it pertains to the town clerk's proposed operating budget for 2024. And I will ask Councilor Flaherty if she has questions or comments.
So in reviewing what you've put before us, it looks like you have a 24% increase overall in your budget. And I understand that a lot of that has to do with more elections this year than in the last year.
And that is correct.
Okay, that makes complete sense. And then in the itemized
Line
information
items?
that you gave us, what you indicate is that you are restoring certain things that have been neglected over the last couple of years due to budget cuts.
That is correct.
Okay. So for example, binding has been held for the past 2 years due to budget cuts. And the codification of our bylaws and ordinances has not been performed the past 2 years due to budget cuts. Is this mandated that we must do this, or is it just best practice to do it?
It's not mandated. It's where we have not codified approved ordinances over the past year, we run the risk of having developers or homeowners looking at laws that are on the books, and we do not have them online for the general public to see. They would have to come in to get a hard copy of that, the copies of the changes. They are available through the council orders, but you would have to be very familiar with that. So this is it should be an annual practice that we do that, but because of the budget cuts 2 years and with the election changes over those 2 years, cuts had to be made, and we're at the point that we can no longer neglect the codification of our bylaws and ordinances, and we have to bring them current. And this would be a project that would be started. I'm looking at close to 20 ordinances that have been approved over these past 2 years. One just happening at the last council meeting that needs to be done. And like I said, we'll be at risk by not doing it.
Thank you. And you have an increase in your laptop PC remote requirements. And can you describe what that technology is going to be for you and how it gets used?
Okay, this all ties into elections too. Elections have become very technology-driven. We have electronic tabulators, and we have these poll books that we register a voter when they come in, and that's all communicated in real time back to the clerk's office. Some of the reasons why this new technology has come into play so much in elections is that we are having multiple options on how you can cast a vote, and we have to keep track of every single one of those methods to vote to ensure that someone doesn't come in more than once to cast a ballot. We have early voting by mail, early voting in person, absentee voting, with something we call UVA-CAVA voting. Those are citizens and military overseas who cast a ballot a different way. They just introduced an online portal for those with ADA requirements to cast a ballot. And then we have the old traditional way of casting a ballot on Election Day. So every time we send out a ballot, we have to have tracking of that. And once that ballot is officially accepted by us, we have to place a marker in there, a switch that tells if that person comes in again when, let's say on Election Day, and they voted in person early, then that person will be rejected from getting another ballot to, like I said, to maintain the integrity. In order for me to do that, for the last 2 years, I was using my personal computer to do that. And it meant placing some sensitive applications on my home computer. I don't like doing that. I think that my computer should not be exposed to government access, and I did it out of necessity. And at this time, I got to end that practice and have the correct tools in order to perform the job correctly.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that point. I think that it should be a town laptop and not your personal laptop on which we conduct that election business. So that clears that up for me. You are in a department which, you know, we are budgeting money for today, but you also generate revenue. And what I'm interested in, and you're not going to have this for me right this second, and that's fine, but I'm interested in understanding a list of all the fees that you collect in your office, dog licenses, marriage, FOIA, et cetera, and then understanding how much you collect in each of those categories. And if you can do that over the last, 5 years, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I apologize. I normally have that list with me, but I've never been asked for it for the last about 6 years. And where we take in revenues, like on dog licenses, we're taking in something like $30,000 a year in registrations. On, what do you call them, vital records, we process over 5,000 vital records. That's about another $50,000 in revenue. Just on my licensing side of the business, we're looking at $250,000 in revenue being generated through our department. Net, I'm about $400,000 or so. Bring it back. I'm pretty close to self-funding. If we increase rates on fees, which some of them should be, because we tend to be the lowest in our fees of other communities. Essentially, my department could be a self-funded department through the fees we collect.
Okay. Well, if I did not ask in other years, I am asking this year, and it's probably just because I have very grave concerns about this budget. So now I'm digging deeper into the details. So thank you for that. I will share that publicly when I have it, and any resident who wants to know more about it can certainly reach out and get it. Those are all my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Maglio, questions or comments?
Thank you. My question is kind of general, and I'm wondering what are the kinds of things that you and your department have decided you can do without?
That we can do without?
Yes. The kinds of things that are not in the budget that if funding weren't an issue, you would put them in the budget.
Well, if there were more funding, there is basically the budget will address all of the issues that I have before me today. There are other things that I would like to do. One of them is preservation. Okay, that's a key issue. We haven't really worked on that. Part of this budget includes an audit to do some inventory of those documents that need to be preserved. And once I get that next year with a capital plan or through some type of grant, if there's grant money available, I'll try to pursue that avenue to try to get some preservations done. There is one of the big things that I put together a proposal about 5 years ago. Unfortunately, the proposal was about $1 million, and it was to digitize a lot of the records. But in my concept that I have is that I was utilizing the town clerk's department as the learning department for the digitation of our documents, because we don't have any room anymore to put a lot of documents. We're kind of busting at the seams on that. And then as we develop the knowledge with this, we would bring other departments in within the town and bring layers. But moving forward at the same time, each year's documentation would be digitized as we move forward, so we wouldn't have a big expense later on down in the future years. So we're going to bring the old stuff in, merge the new stuff forward, and eventually we'd have a digitized system. And this would help on the FOIA requests too, that we could put all of the stuff online. People could search things that are allowed to be searchable to gather their own data. Right now, we do about 3,000 public records requests a year. That's 12 public records requests every single business day. I estimate there are 240 business days in a calendar year for the government. So there's a lot of my office time, my personal time, that I do come in to monitor every single one of those requests and ensure that they're assigned to each of the departments. Would assist in that when we can easily have the residents get to that digital format. We kind of lag behind in that in other communities our size.
Thank you. So what about the person power in order to actually do all of that? Do you feel like the staffing is adequate for the demands?
I think we could use another half person, but at this time, I know we can't afford it, so I wouldn't even go there to ask for it.
Yeah.
I work probably about 60 hours a week covering for these shortfalls that we have, and I don't mind doing that. It's part of how the job's supposed to work. You can't always get what you want. It'd be nice to have one, but if you wanted me to use my creative ideas, there's a lot of things that I could use to help things streamline operations that would help us later on down the line. But I know the budget's been tight. I just can't bring myself forward to say, give me another person to kind of relieve myself into that. Once things get better, I'd be more than happy to come by and tell you that I need another person.
Okay. I think it's important for people listening, watching, to understand what kinds of demands every department is up against in terms of when the money isn't as healthy and flowing as we would like it to be. And so one of the things that I continue to think about as we look at these numbers, that we are presented with making choices not about what our priorities are, but we're forced to decide what we will do without in order to continue to make ends meet. And it's a tough situation to be in, and I commend every department for figuring out how to do that, but ultimately there is an impact, and it's lagging behind or not having accessible information or not being able to put our hands on things in a timely manner. So I think it's important for people to understand what the trade-offs are for being one of the lowest tax rates in the South Shore. These are some of them. So I thank you.
Yeah. If I have one moment to address something on this. The success of my department accomplishing our goals day to day is because of the sacrifices of my staff too. During election time, we have to block off several months of time that you're not allowed to take more than 2 days off because we can't afford to have a short staff to make sure that day-to-day business is done, as well as all the work in elections. Most communities, okay, they do not do regular business on election day. I keep my office fully operation to do anything from a dog license to be married or whatever the case anything you want, you can be served like any other day. And on top of that, we're kind of running an election on election day. And not too many communities do that. Of cities, which Town of Braintree are cities, okay, many of the communities have a separate election department where the town clerk does not get involved in election, or the city clerk, we should call them, because that's what the true title is. They have an election department that their function is 100% for the year, just doing the election type of business. The state, the Acts of 22 have mandated a lot of extra work onto the office staff, where typically each day when somebody registers to vote, it is maybe about 4 or 5, and it's easy to get them into the system and send them their acknowledgement. But with automatic voter registration through the Registry of Motor Vehicles, there are 28,000 registered voters in Braintree. You renew your driver's license every 4 years. So essentially, we get a quarter of those 28,000 having a automatic voter change. Whether you want it or not, it happens. We get notice of that, and we're finding that there were a lot of errors within that. So something that took maybe 20 minutes in the morning for a staff member to do is taking 4 hours a day now. And they're laying that on top of their existing functions going on. We've learned some new tricks that once a month we can do an extract, and through an Excel spreadsheet we can identify the duplicate records, and it worked wonderful, saves a lot of time, but it's trial and error, and we're getting there. But a lot of stuff, as I stated in my comments, it's mandated by Mass General Law. I have no say that we want to do it or not, and unfortunately, it got to get done. And, you know, we are busting at the seams.
Well, we're lucky to have a department full of people who are willing to sacrifice their personal time, who are willing to sacrifice the way their family would prefer to take vacations or take time off by not taking time off during that. We are lucky that people are willing to sacrifice beyond what their job calls for. I don't think it's fair that we have to rely on that in order to be able to have accurate elections and dog licenses and everything else. I don't think that's fair to ask our staff to have to sacrifice that much to work 60 hours a week when they're being paid for 4 or 40 or 35 or whatever it is. But it's very nice to know, and we are very grateful that your staff is willing to do that, and certainly we hope that that trend changes. So,
Yeah, I
thank
hope so
you.
too. I'm blessed with the staff I have.
Yeah.
I couldn't ask for a better group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Maglio. Okay. So I do echo a lot of your concerns, Council Maglio, as far as trying to find those areas where we're cutting back on services due to the fact that we just don't have the money to perform what traditionally have been very valuable services to the people of Braintree. So speaking specifically about the clerk's office, so a lot of my questions have been answered by the previous speakers. So just for clarification on just a couple of those points, so from an election standpoint, we have, so page 21 of tab F is $4,000 line item. That's specifically for the elections for 2023 and 2024 postage.
For postage. Okay, that,
In your summary, you provided a $4,000 reference
yeah,
for postage.
let me,
I'm sorry, I stand corrected, for non-election.
for non-election postage, page 21.
Right. Okay, so then, just to confirm, the postage is
I
on
have-
page 22 for $30,000.
that is for our election-related mailings?
That's all right. The 30,000 is for election-related. Every ballot, when a person requests an early vote by mail ballot, it's on the town's dime to mail out that ballot. It's at 90 cents per ballot to mail it out. The state pays for the return postage if it's
Great.
paid.
And the printing at $23,000, the next line item below, I'm assuming is related to that mailing, or is it other types of?
The 23,000, is that on tab, the election department?
That's
Yes,
correct.
okay. This year, it's the local elections. We have ballots. I have to budget for printing those ballots. The ballots cost about 40 cents per ballot, and there's multiple ballots, early voting ballots and election day ballots, and there's quite a few that get be printed. One thing I want to point out, though, is if we take a look, it was in a summary I think I presented to you back about a month ago, the preliminary election, that will only happen if more than 2 candidates are qualified with nomination papers, which we'll find out in November. If there are only 2 candidates for the mayor's race, by charter, we do not have a preliminary election, and that would save the town about $81,000 in costs. Yes.
Okay. That would
Okay.
be the election workers, the printing.
That election work, the
mailings.
ballot printing, you name it. I have a summary down here on it, and elections are quite expensive. When I first started doing this job in 2014, it was about $30,000 to operate an election. It has grown immensely.
Okay, so on the elections then, just for clarification point, the town is on the hook for paying only the printing costs of ballots for local elections. The state and the
correct.
federal government picks up the dime on those elections.
That's correct.
So when we have a federal election or a state election coinciding with a municipal election, is there a shared cost?
Yeah, okay, if it's happening at the same time, most likely on state, federal elections, there's not enough space, according to what you want to do from the town perspective, to marry on with the state ballot. If there's no room on their ballot, we have to print our own ballot. Aside from the cost of printing those ballots for that particular election at the same time, we would have to add additional staffing at the end of the night to separate the 2 ballots and then to go through those ballots looking for...
Sure. Has that happened? Have we actually, I don't recall having 2 ballots at an election.
Fortunately, we haven't, but in many communities they do, and it's according to what you're asking for. If it was like for a charter, like the charter change is something that needs to be discussed at some point in time, when that would have to go before the voters. If it's going to be done with the state election next year, then we'd probably have to add a new ballot, and we'd have to figure out.
But in the cases you've cited where we've got all federal, state, and municipal offices selections on the same ballot, are we paying anything on that
No,
ballot?
if we wouldn't have to pay for that at all. But let's take a look at the November 2022 ballot. That was filled both front and back side. Because of that, you couldn't do it. You couldn't even put a singular question on it. The print for the questions.
Okay, I
Yeah.
think you, just for the sake of time, I think you've answered my question on that, so thank
Okay.
you. Very thorough answer, as usual, and I appreciate that. So the election, let's see, all right. Okay, what else did I have? From the digitalization, have you digitalized anything to date in your history running the office?
Have we digitalized things of date? There are some things that we have digitized. All of the FOIA requests that we come in, they're all in a digital format, so we can retrieve any public records request. Because of COVID, I switched over our marriage application process through a digitation. It's an online application that we have all of those records.
So you
Because
pay-
of the expensive cost of vital record paper, we're talking for a lousy 6,000 copies, I was paying close to $1 a sheet of paper. I switched over to a non-custom paper product, which I pay now about $600 for, and that has reduced our costs. We can utilize the state system at this point in time with that paper, where we can go back 50 years and get some birth and death records right off of their system. However, that caused a temporary disruption in our operation, and that's why you'll see in my budget request.
But that's just a
a
tip of
printing.
the iceberg for what you really need to get done
Oh,
with digitalization.
Yeah, that is like a tiny ice cube. If
Okay.
you want to look at it on
And
a.
so my next question for you, again, trying to look at costs. Are you currently housing any physical documents outside of the town hall property or town-controlled properties that cost you?
No, nothing, right now, I'm in public buildings with some documentation. I do not want to state the public building I'm in
And-
with the documentation, because some of it is sensitive.
Well, to that point, so are you incurring additional costs for security of,
No, they're part of this.
Confidential
the
information?
They're the part of the locked system the town has in those areas. They have a key card lock. to the-
okay, and that meets any kind of state and federal compliance?
Yes, we are. Actually, as you talk about state and federal compliance, I had applied to have an audit done of my office for security for the upcoming federal elections. So they're going to come in and take a look at how well my office is prepared for security. That's no cost to do this audit.
Okay, and from just, I don't want to beat this one to death, but from a perspective of, we have a volume presently of historical hard copy documents that are being stored on town property, some more sensitive in nature than others that require more of a security aspect to them. Are we facing right now a situation of we're going to exhaust our storage capabilities? Anytime,
Eventually, I think you are.
eventually,
Yes.
what, 5 years, 10 years,
Probably,
1 year?
well, you look at, by law, every single record that we produce in government is supposed to be saved for a period of time. And I know some departments are working through an audit and trying to get some of these documentation. I'm working on a proposal now to look at some old 70, 80-year-old documents and submit it to the Secretary of Records Office to ensure, to see if we can dispose of some of those
Right.
documents. But eventually, we're going to run out of space. Because we have to have them. That's probably one of the reasons why we bind them and then we put them in.
So the disposal of any of those historical records would be dependent upon them being digitized?
Yeah, you'd want to do that first, because you always want to have
Okay, so there is going to
access.
be, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I think you've given me a pretty good idea that we have, what we have here is, it's a challenge that is building. It's not yet at a situation where there is a critical need, but it's looming.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. That should do it for the digitization. And are there any, let's see, from a grave standpoint, you oversee the grave, the burial plot program.
Not any longer.
Okay, is that brought back in-house to
Okay.
DPW?
No, it hasn't. This was always a DPW function. Once the person who was doing that function retired, I don't know what developed there after that point, but I was asked by the former mayor if I would take over the cemetery administrative tasks. And like I'm part of the town, I have no problem doing that. And what I did with that is I digitized all of the cemetery records for the Braintree Cemetery. We have 5 cemeteries, so I digitized that by going out to every headstone, marking the plot and recreating or identifying the old records to ensure that we have an automatic application that we can go in and look up anybody's record. There are 4 other cemeteries that were not done. At some point in time, when I took over the responsibility of the licensing, which used to be in the mayor's office under the town solicitor's department, I was asked to take over that function. But
So on that point, so have you already paid those costs of the you've given me a little bit of a historical maintenance task that you took care of when you took it over from a historical standpoint. So have you completed that task?
no, the task is, like I said, the task was only completed for the Braintree Cemetery, which is the newest cemetery.
Right, so you still
down
have
there.
4 remaining.
That was done by hand. I had a programmer write a program in Access for me that I digitized that just to identify who owns.
Okay, so
who's
you've
the
created
deed
a
owner.
record-keeping system that is
Yeah,
more
that's all
automated.
paid for, and I pay an annual fee, which still comes out of my budget, by the way, of about $500 a year to do the updates.
Okay, and now so there was mentioned previous in your testimony or answering questions that there is a possibility the town clerk, through all of the various fees that you collect, that you could self-fund. It's just as a kind of measurement of what you're bringing in.
That's right.
All right, so how are we looking right now? I know that the Braintree cemeteries are pretty close to being filled, and I know there's a new section being built on Plain Street. Any idea of how many plots that approximate ballpark figure that we're looking at? And then, of course, that just gives us a little bit of insight into the opportunities for revenues in that area.
Back 3 years ago, when I was turning over the cemetery function to the new holder of that position, I put out a report stating that we had less than 100 graves available for sale without the new development going to place. At that time, I identified that the majority of graves being sold was being sold to non-residents. At that time, I proposed that we have a 2-tier rate system, as well as increasing the rates of purchasing the plots, and as well as doing the burials and whatever costs there. We essentially just about doubled the cost of everything, with an outside resident paying a premium. And an outside, we made a definition of who a resident would be. And if someone lived in the town for, let's say, 20 years in the past, they would be considered a resident to be buried here, especially if this was their hometown. But if you kind of moved in and just moved out later on.
Right, so you've created 2 tiers.
Yeah, we created a 2-tier system to help self-fund that, to help
And is
provide additional funding into that.
Is it meeting its end?
We're not selling many graves. Like, so far this year, we sold 4 graves.
Okay.
Okay, so until that new development gets done, graves are at a premium.
Okay. Thank you very much on that. That is all that I have for questions for you. So I would like to ask the council president if she has any questions for the town clerk.
I do not, and just want to say thank you, Clerk Casey, for all of your work, and please extend my gratitude to your staff.
Great, thank you.
Do you have anything further for us?
No, I just appreciate your support on the budget. I really thought out this budget. I know the challenges that the town has for the budget. I make my sacrifices. I know what I can kind of skim off for like another year without causing a problem. But when I come here telling you I need money to make this happen, I really mean that. I don't think we can be pushed back any further on it. It's something that has to get done.
Well, we appreciate your diligence and
Okay.
your capabilities in tweaking that and stretching that buck. And was there a comment, Chief of Staff?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think one of when I met with the various department heads and we talked about this digitization as a concern and funding, Clerk Casey really has done a lot of homework and put in a pretty significant ask. There is opportunity to consider utilizing for preservation of your vital records, community preservation funding. And so we're going to give that some consideration and, maybe not come in with a big $1 million ask, but let's get them started.
Thank you, that's interesting.
Sure.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, thank you very much, Clerk
Thank you for
Casey.
your time.
All right, so next up on our agenda, on the schedule of events we have this evening, is the Blue Hills Regional High School. So, if we could have the representatives, please take a seat. So, while we're getting set up there, I just want to say welcome, Ms. Resende,
So welcome.
or
For the record, my name's Eric Erskine. I am the town elected representative for the Blue Hills District Committee. And with me is Jill Rossetti, and she is the superintendent of Blue Hills.
my apologies, I said Resende. I'm sorry.
I didn't
Pardon.
last year, so.
All right.
No worries.
Okay. Well, welcome. And would you like to start off with a statement?
I'd just like to thank you for having us this evening. We consider ourselves an extension of your districts. So with that in mind, we are very conscious of how the towns function, and we try to keep our budget as low as possible.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, so with that, I'm going to, is there any comment from the mayor's office? Okay, thank you very much. All right, so first line of questioning will be from Councilor Flaherty.
Before I ask questions, there has been in the past a presentation from the Blue Hills Regional Technical School concerning the budget. Would you like to present that first, or do you want to, or no?
If it's the will of the board, I'll be glad to. I'm ready.
I think that you should speak first, and then I will ask questions.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Thank you. So how we create our budget, we just go in a circle. We start doing some research in October, November, December. Each department we meet with, they look at their budget, and they present it to the directors, and the directors bring it to the business manager and myself. And we solicit input from school council and different PACs. When we move from that, we analyze it and we make decisions, and then we manage it, we bring it to the school committee. Basically, we start with zero-based budgeting, and we focus on what we actually need. So we don't look at what we got last year. We say, what do you really need? And there's a lot of expensive equipment that goes into vocational technical education, so we use a lot of grants, and everybody's been wonderful writing for competitive grants. So that's basically how it works. And then the school committee agrees in March. We have a budget hearing, then we bring it forward to the towns. So our budget priorities, we focus on transparency, fiscal responsibility, accountability to maintain special education, as we have a 26.4% increase in our population of special ed students. And then we leverage our grant opportunities. So those are our 3 budget priorities. They haven't really changed much. Next, we have our 2024 budget goals, and we align them with our 4 pillars of our strategy plan, which includes teaching and learning, positive and supportive culture and climate, meaningful community engagement, and effective recruitment and retention of our staff. So we bring these goals before the school committee, and every year the full committee votes whether to accept them or not, and every year we change them and tweak them a little bit. So those are our 5 goals. I don't read from slides, sorry. It's boring. Our expense drivers, here we always face all these same expense drivers, and these are the things that the Student Opportunity Act was trying to combat. So as you can see in the blue circles, We have all of the student learning options. Inflation was big on supplies and materials this year. And we pay attention to our students that are at risk or low income and at poverty. So here's our budget breakdown right here. So this is probably what you're really interested in. So overall, we have a 3.78% increase. The salaries increased by 4.54%, and the expenses were at 2.92%, which is up a little bit. And again, I explained that's usually due to inflation and our supplies for electrical and copper and different things that vocational programs need. On the salary accounts, we have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and salaries, wages, and benefits combined for over 74% of the district's total budgeted expenditures. On the 2024 salary accounts, I had done some research. We had an increase in enrollment of our students from about 854 over 5 years to 917. And during COVID, we really felt like it was a burden on one single nurse for all of those students and teachers. So we ended up adding a 0.5 into the ESSA grant, and we told you, I believe, last year that we would, or the year before, that we would be rolling that over into the general fund. So we have 1.5 nurses. There's no increase. I mean, it's stayed the same. We just knew that we were going to need it. So we wanted to make sure that we actually did and followed that and tracked it for a year and a half. And then our athletic trainer, we just basically had a real challenge trying to find an athletic trainer. Bridgewater stopped its program, so it was kind of really challenging. We just moved them from contracted services to a Blue Hills staff person. So it really didn't increase our expenses, just full-time equivalent. And then on the 1,000 salary, there was no major changes, just contractual obligations. We had been in negotiations all through COVID every single year, and then we finally stopped, and we knew what, in this budget coming, that, you know, that it was a 2% increase for most of the staff. And next year, we'll be in contract negotiations for 5 of our groups, so. On the 2,000 salary account, everything was really just basically here a contractual increase. There's nothing really significant there. On the 3,000, on the 3,200 line, we had a 0.5 nurse move from, I told you, the ESSA grant into the general budget. We were also moved a food services person from the general fund into a different bracket. So instead of, due to COVID, we moved a bigger portion instead to like the 60/40 revolving account. That's how that worked. And we are fully staffed on the 3,600 line, fully staffed for security after 2 years, which we felt was really important with all the things going on in this lovely world that we live in. We want to make sure our first priority is that everyone's safe. And on the 4,000 salary account, we have a 2.61% increase. On the 42020 line, maintenance of buildings, there was some turnover, so we saved some money. New people we hired for less. So that was, you see the 26.2 decrease. FY23, our expense accounts, here is a summary for it. We have increased in fixed costs and inflations, like I said, and everybody's experiencing on supplies and materials. And our competitive grants helped. Like I said, our leadership team has written many, many grants. Our Perkins grant, we take it, and every year we get about $200,000 for vocational equipment, professional development for teachers. And we try to rotate what we can't put in for state-of-the-art equipment in our general budget and make a list. So if we can't get it to a teacher the first year, we try to get it to them the second year or the third year. Vocational equipment is very expensive. Bakery ovens can go $40,000, $65,000. They haven't been touched for years, and then you have to have them installed. So you understand, I'm sure. 1,000 expense account, no major real increase. It was at 0.56%. The 2,000 expense account, basically, there's nothing really here. We just moved to the correct function codes. If you see the 240%, increase. It's not really, it's just we had to start cleaning up and moving things over for our instructional hardware. The 3,000 expense account majors, transportation, that was our bus contract. In athletics, in the 3510 line. Due to 2020, we didn't know what to expect with transportation costs for sports and athletics, so we underfunded it. So that's why you see an increase there. And we pay for about half the resource salary, for the resource office salary. 4,000 expense. This is interesting. We only went up 0.54% because due to the new building project and the renovation that was completed, we ended up saving money on water. We reallocated those funds into areas of need, and we locked in our electricals because we're part of a consortium with other municipalities in December of 2022. So we went from about 8 cents to 14.8 cents per kilowatt. On the expense account, 5,000. On the 5150 employee separation cost, it looks like a big increase, but the auditor told us to increase it there. It had been low for a while. And then the 5250 insurance rates for retired employees went down, and I'm sure you can all understand why. And the 5450 debt bans, so this is just the cost of financing. We're supposed to be going before the MSBA board in June, and we had to, there was a turnover at the MSBA with who was managing our cases. We finally got someone who really knows what he's doing, which is wonderful, and that will save us some money on those short-term bans that we have to keep redoing every 6 months with our treasurer. So the 7,000 and 8,000 expense account majors, basically we have a capital plan and we have a fleet replacement site recycle. So every year we try to replace one thing. We have 14 passenger vans that shuttle our students to jobs where they build additions for people in different communities as we're an application to do that. We have to buy snowplows and sanders. We had to do our bleachers over. That wasn't part of the project, so we're still painting them right now and changing out some rotten wood into some metal. Last year we had to finish the driveway, and some of our trucks are from the 80s, so sometimes they get donated to our collision repair and they use it as a learning tool, and sometimes we just can't use them because they're just too unsafe. So under the long debt term principal, the 4.79% is the building renovation, and then the long-term debt interest. So that's about it. Our MSBA reimbursement, I think it started off at 52% for eligible costs, and we're probably going to hopefully end up somewhere around 48%. We're not really, that was based on the original agreement. And there we go to our budget timeline. So we're just finishing up. I think you're the last ones that we're presenting to, and then we're also going to town meetings, which we're looking forward. So far, you know, I think our budget will get the 2/3 vote, if not all of the 9 towns. And then we're going to go right into assessment calculations, which is what you're all interested in for the town of Braintree. So basically, for anyone that doesn't know, there's a Chapter 70 formula foundation. So the goal is to ensure that every district has sufficient resources to meet its foundation. So if you look at the little pencil, basically we take the enrollments times the per pupil and we get the foundation budget. The foundation budget, which is that yellow square right in the middle, is actually the minimum that the district has to spend on education. And then there are costs associated with the 11 different spending categories. We take the local income effort is based on residents' income, and we multiply that. We add that with the local income, the local property effort with the income, and then you get your required local contribution, which is the tip of the pencil. And it's basically how much your city or town can reasonably raise. So the state cost times the number of students, again, gives you the foundation budget, and the foundation budget is what the town or the city can pay, and we come up with a minimum local contribution. The statutory method of assessment, if you look in the middle of the slide, BHR, or Blue Hills, incepted this in the late 60s, I believe, when they built the school, and that's what we use. And then you have your Chapter 70 projection. So if you look at the second line, Braintree, your foundation enrollment is 157 students. The foundation budget is 3.425252, and the required contribution is 2.449541. And the difference, Chapter 70 then takes that and takes the difference to fill that gap. So where does this gives us a general, this slide gives us a general idea. So if you take the top part of where the head is, like where the green is, and you drew a line, basically below it is the rest of what makes Blue Hill's budget, which we use to educate our students. So about 24%, Chapter 70, required local contribution is 47%, and then we go on to local contribution, transportation, capital, and other revenue. So the FY 23-24 budgeted worksheet, we have a $22 million expenses and salaries of the general budget. Transfer of E&D to the stabilization account fund was $300,000, so we put that into the stabilization account, and the MSBA renovation, we paid the MSBA debt with that, which is 2.93. For a total operating and capital budget debt service and stabilization of $25,129,517. The state funding, we had projected Chapter 70 aid of 7.2, and then we go for the budgeted transportation aid, which is $625,000. Because we're a regional school district, we get transportation reimbursement. They always tell us it's going to be 100%, but I believe it's somewhere in between 72 and 76%. E&D funding, which is our excess and deficiency, it's like your free cash. So this directly reduces your assessment. So we applied $350,000 to excess and deficiency. Our regional member assessments, the state gives you a required contribution and says that you have to pay the $12.9 million. So you're assessed for this, and then the assessed contribution is the additional assessment that we have to use to make our education whole for the Blue Hills students. So the Blue Hills operating budget assessment is $14,560,011. And then the total Blue Hills operating budget revenue sources is $22 million. E&D funding, again, I said we moved $300,000 into stabilization. And then we go down into the capital debt services. Principal was $765,000, and then the interest was 1.3 for the MSBA, for a total of 2.2093831. So the total Blue Hills capital debt service assessment was $2,093,831, and then we have a total operating and capital budget funding of $25,129,517. I don't have to talk about schools careers because you're not part of that. Here are our 5 items that help us calculate the 2024 assessments for each town. And then on this page, we have our municipal assessments. So Braintree was up 9 students, and the per pupil cost, which can be found on about page 41 of your booklet, is about $19,395. So if you look at this chart, you were up 9 students, and so you have your required local contribution, our operating assessment, and then the 4-year enrollment and the renovation assessment. You don't have school to careers, so that's a 0. And the total requested FY24 assessment is $3,047,374,000. And the total requested assessment for FY23, it'll show you that. And the assessment increase was $215,975. So you're up about 7.63% due to a lot of it's due to towns fluctuate with increases of students or decreases of students. So although your budget went up and one of the other towns went up, some of them actually went down. And that balances out over time, like we try to keep it around the same so that there's no like shocking increases. And if there is, we try to notify you right away. And then the next slide just gives you a summary of what's going on. And that's about it. I do know that Michelle had sent out a refund to the state, to each of the towns, and she sent Braintree, I believed, the enrollment was 148 at the time, so it was $63,389.24. So that was what you sent. You got a letter in March, I think, with an adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Quite a bit of information, very thorough. So I'm going to ask Councilor Flaherty if you would start with any questions or comments you may have.
You always give an excellent presentation,
Oh, thank you so much.
and I find it incredibly helpful, and it keeps my number of questions down very low. But my main comment is this. It looks to me like you have a growing program, which is wonderful. And I know you have a new building and also a lot of capital expenses to keep up with the equipment and so forth, but you've kept expenses very reasonable. And I think that that is due to excellent planning and management of your budget, and I appreciate that, and it gives me a great deal of confidence in this program, and it will have my full support.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. On behalf of the Blue Hills community.
I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true.
I know, I kind of gathered that.
Thank you very much. Councilor Manglio, questions or comments, please?
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. And I have to say props to whoever does your PowerPoint, if it's you or someone in your office, because it's you. Nice job. Very nice job. Creative.
I just pushed a button, that's all.
Well, your graphics, you've been able to connect a lot of numbers with some functional kinds of images to provide as much information as possible, and that's really helpful, as well as your really great booklet here. I would have to say that I don't have any other large questions either. I'm very ready to support your budget as asked for. I just have two questions out of more of a curiosity, and that is your resource officer. Did you say, so just a few questions about your resource officer. Did you say that you split that cost?
We didn't used to, so that came about a couple of years ago. They wanted to get another SRO in Canton in the middle schools, and so we split the cost with them now.
Okay. And that your school resource officer is an armed police officer?
Correct.
Correct.
He's from Canton.
From Canton. And so is there a job description for the role of a school resource officer that you could share with us after this?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to look at and get back to you.
Great.
I know that we have an MOA that we're still working on, so I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. We just had a presentation here in Braintree at one of our recent council meetings all about school resource officers and security and different measures. And so one of the things that I have been really wondering is what is that actual role of the school resource officer. And I'm just collecting that information to become as informed as I can. So getting a sense of that from Blue Hills would be terrific. The other is, in terms of the maintenance of your building, who is in charge of that?
I have a director of facilities, buildings and grounds, and he's in charge of that, and he works with us all the time. He has a huge 5-year Google sheet that he puts a capital plan on, and it rotates and we prioritize as needed. And he's amazing, and he has a huge crew.
Huge crew. How big is his crew?
Well, there's 3 shifts, so I think there's about probably 12 to 15 people altogether. The lowest shift is his 3rd shift, but that includes security. So like we have a switchboard person, and then we have some people on the weekends. We have 2 custodians during the day, and then the rest of them are like maintenance men that go around and specialize in plumbing and electrical, and somebody does the fields and somebody does the grounds. And at night, we have some custodial that comes in and cleans up and does all that stuff. They wash the floors. It's a very big campus. We have a pool, so we have to pay some of his guys, get extra certifications that's built into their contract, because the pool's enormous. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so this, I'm interested about in this 5-year Google spreadsheet. So that I would assume is ongoing. So you add a year up front, you take a year off, you check off what's been done. How long has that been in existence?
So I started as superintendent in 2019 of September, and I believe he came on, everybody retired, so I had to get a new business manager, a new facilities director. So we all kind of came on. I came on first, and they came on in like, I think 2020 of like right before COVID. Like I think my facilities director started like the week before COVID. So they've been there almost 4 years.
And did they institute this policy in terms of their system for keeping the building in good condition and for addressing, and when you mentioned even choosing the equipment to rotate out?
Yes, because I asked him, we had a facilities director who was there for a long time, and I wanted to make sure that we had fresh eyes. And so the first thing I asked him was, what do you see when you come here, and what would you change, or what do you think needs immediate attention? And he's really detail oriented. Yeah, he's on top of it. And I think it's really important to take pride in where you work. And so if I see a paper on the ground, I pick it up. And so they see me pick it up, and they pick it up. And I just think it's, everything's connected.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a place of education, and where students are coming every day, and that needs to be honored, a place of learning, a place of being enriched. And so that's really great. That's an area that I'm also very interested in terms of just collecting that information. So I appreciate it. I know that's not directly related to your budget, but it really matters how we go about planning to protect our investments. And it sounds like you are also way ahead on that too. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We try.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Maglio. So there's some interesting topics that Council Maglio just brought up that are shared types of concerns we have here in Braintree. And so the original building of Blue Hills, any idea how old that building is?
That was started in 1963 with the former selectman, Mr. Sullivan. We're talking Jim Sullivan was on the board back then. So,
Okay, that was the creation of the Blue Hills Regional Schools?
correct.
Okay, and you're still using that building?
Correct.
And you had the Massachusetts School Building Authority granted you some money, and what was the scope of that project?
That was called a limited scope repair, and they won't do them anymore. So basically what a limited scope repair was, it was supposed to do doors, windows, electrical, plumbing, right?
All the mechanicals.
All the mechanicals, and you couldn't expand the bones of the building.
The envelope and then mechanicals of the school.
I'm sorry, could you speak into the mic? Thank you.
So that would have been the mechanicals and also the envelope of the school to bring it environmentally sound to today's standards.
Okay, and from a maintenance standpoint, what has been the biggest challenges, the biggest costs that you've encountered? I'm not saying through the life of the school, but since in your tenure.
Before the renovation?
She started,
I've been there since 1992, so
I'm sorry, 19, since 2019, when you took over in the current capacity.
that's pretty much when we started the renovations.
Okay,
Yeah, so,
we started them in 2017, so we were almost done with them in 2019.
Yeah.
I think there was just a lot of wear and tear, and we were worried about things failing, like boiler systems. They were really old. Nothing major. What they did was they had an excellent maintenance plan, and they just kept fixing things that needed to be fixed.
And this maintenance plan you refer to is one that has been in place for decades?
Yes.
Okay, for decades.
And so, you know, the boilers once things got replaced, now it's just like maintaining things and inspecting them and making sure they're running.
So you were able to control costs by staying ahead of the game?
Yes.
Right, okay. And that is, and your capital plan primarily is outfitting programs, school programs, and of that nature, would you say the majority of your capital expenditures?
Yes.
Not necessarily the building, but equipment to maintenance?
Yes.
The facilities, the grounds, et cetera, as well as keeping up with technology?
Yes.
Okay.
Also would be the buses. We
Yeah.
do have equipment for the students to go out on job sites. So the construction program might need a trailer, a box trailer. So that's part of the capital planning. They put in their wish list, and the board and also Ms. Rossetti goes through the wish list, and whoever is really needing it is the first one. And eventually, we hope to get everybody what they need, but, you know, with only so much money in the budget, we have to spread it out.
Okay, thank you. You just, I'm trying to gain a perspective on how you're staying up ahead of these costs. We know that repair costs can be a real budget buster for you when you have not had an opportunity to maintain a robust preventive maintenance program. Obviously, you're in a case where that does not apply. You have had a robust maintenance repair program.
May I give you another example? So in the summertime, one of our auto repair instructors comes in and maintains our fleet of those mini buses, that 14 passenger vans that take the students. The teachers drive them to job sites, field trips, externships, hospitals, all those kinds of things. So he spends the whole summer and gets paid to do that. So that saves us a lot of money, believe it or not, because it's done in-house at cost.
That's great. And I take it you're able to utilize, or you're limited, are you, in a limited fashion, are you able to utilize the skills that have been developed in your senior upper class students?
Yes, so also our facilities director every summer hires 2 kids, or 2 students, to help him do painting, all sorts of odds and end jobs, mow the grass, whatever else he needs. Well, because a lot of people, as you know, someone was talking about vacation time. There's a lot of vacation time that happens in the summertime, so he supplements with 2 students every year. And
Okay.
they get a great experience doing it.
Okay, and then my last question, do you anticipate any particular vocations needing an injection of additional funding as you see types of vocations starting to become more prominent? I know it looked like you've done some more technology-related programs you've implemented over the last decade, if not a little longer than that were above and beyond your more traditional vocations.
So we try to, my vocational director does that for the 17 programs, and so we try to find out what their priorities are, because some of them, like you said, are a little more expensive, like the CNC routing machines can be big, so we try to get them, and then we try to train them all at the same time. Right now, I'm looking into a partnership on clean energy. Someone contacted me today, so we try to supplement, and we try to, we have a lot of advisory boards for each of the vocational programs. We're required to have an advisory board, and they have to have a composition of certain people. So somebody might have to be handicapped, and somebody might have to be a person of color, and somebody might have to be a non-traditional person. And they have to have experience out in the field, like Mr. Erskine's on one. And they send us a lot of donations, so that's helped with our materials and supplies this year. Companies sometimes are very generous, and kids make mistakes on things, so it's great when we get those donations, because that's how you learn. So, yeah, we evaluate and see what's coming down the pike, and our advisory board's members will tell us, oh, you have to do this because this is what they're doing out in industry, or you really need this machine, or you really need this training for the students, because they know what's out there. And then our co-ops too. So a lot of our kids will go out on co-op or paid internships. We're going to have a co-op signing day either this year or next year, those are kids that are going right out to work. So about 44% of our kids go to four-year college, and maybe 16% go to two-year college. So it's about 60-something percent, and then the rest go off into work or technical or the military. Not everybody that
Trades?
Yeah, not everybody, they go off into the locals, 103s, construction, electrical. There's all different opportunities for our students, and we try to get them certifications too that are nationally recognized.
Well, that's an excellent step up for these young people, and I know it's become very difficult to get into Blue Hills as you compare it to the past. So that really speaks volumes of your anticipation, how you're working with the current workforce and also with the future industries, if you will. And I'm glad to hear that you have a clean energy program, and there's this focus on sustainability, repurposing, et cetera, all that fall into that. So that's good to hear. We're happy about that. That is it for my questions, unless you have anything further that you would like to ask of us, or any questions?
Nope.
Okay. I'd like to, I'd like to give the Council President an opportunity also. My apologies, Madam President.
Thank you, Chairman Reynolds. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I am so impressed talking to Braintree students who are Blue Hills students, and the presentations you guys give every year, it's clear, it's transparent, it makes it so easy for me to be a proponent and an advocate for all the great work you're doing, because it's easy to understand, it's easy to explain, and I know it's not easy to put something together that is as complicated as an education budget in a simple format for lay people to understand. So I just wanted to, again, echo the sentiments of my colleagues and really thank you for taking the time to do that, and thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. And I'm just continue to be amazed at the work that you and your teams do over at Blue Hills, and it's such an unbelievable resource for our town. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I will relay those messages to them.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for having us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Okay, next up on our agenda is Town Council. Would you like to take your questions from where you are? It's fine with me.
okay?
It's fine with me, absolutely. Great. So, welcome to the podium, if you will, Clerk Semino. So, why don't we ask you if you can give us just your opening comments?
Okay, certainly. So the Town Council is a legislative branch of government for the town of Braintree. There are 9 members, all elected by the voters. Town Council serves our residents. Town Council reviews ordinances, measures, and certain appointments brought before them. The FY 2024 budget request from the Mayor's office is to level fund and then cut by 2%. Our Town Council FY 2024 budget is $265,233. It's a 1.4% decrease from last year's budget. We do not have an additional $1,600 to cut to meet the 2% ask. So we zeroed out 4 line items, which totaled $1,000, which was consultants, technology, postage, and mileage. The administrative clerical is increased just due to COLA. Elected officials is the same. That's a yearly stipend of $47,500. The audit fee is our Powers and Sullivan external auditor. That's the same at $57,000. Cell phone is staying the same at $600. and that's so you can contact me 24/7. Printing is staying the same at $4.50. Approximately, that would cover about 1 box of business cards for each counselor. And as you all know, every 2 years, members change, president changes, vice president changes, so, letterhead could potentially be something we need to also purchase. We decreased office supplies by $100, so the $1,200 will cover 2 rounds of printer cartridges for my printer in the office. And then we increased advertising. Last year, we had decreased it to $7,500. It's been really tight and tough to really, make it last, to pay those bills. I've actually reached out to other departments to pay some of the legal ads. But really, town council should have the proper funding to put the legal ads in. It's required per Mass General Law and the town charter to have these legal ads. And unfortunately, they're unpredictable. How many we'll have, it depends on what the mayor's office sends down to council to vote on. And then also, if funding is to be bonded, we actually have to put in the entire motion that we're voting on in the newspaper. Can be quite costly. Meetings, we left the same at 2,000, and that's really for any type of meetings inside or outside of town hall. Then we have our dues, memberships, and subscriptions. We've increased to $2,500 from $1,800, and that's just to pay for council MMA registration costs, all on, keep it kind of neat on one line item. And decreased our town auditor to $6,500, and we're hoping to encumber funds from FY 2023 to make up for that difference. Did I say 6,500? Yeah, that would have been way too low. I apologize. 65,000. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, Councillor Flaherty, you are first up.
Thank you. Thank you for that clear and succinct explanation of our budget. And I understand that the mayor's directive was to level fund the budget and then cut what percentage?
2%.
2%. Okay. And that was to be across all the departments?
Correct.
Okay. And last year, how much did we cut?
Well, last year we cut 2.01% from our FY 2022 budget.
I mean, was that the directive?
Yes.
Yes. And before that, we cut?
10%.
10%. And before that, we cut?
4%. Do you remember, Ed? Was it?
Don't remember, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
It's okay.
Okay.
That's fine. The point is, these are year-over-year cuts. When was the last time the town council budget was increased?
Do you have that?
Yeah, so if you look at... Through the chair, if I may. On page 3 of your memo, and it was pointed out to me that the years are going left to right, so I'm sorry if that's a little bit hard to read. However, if you look in FY19, the council was essentially fully funded at $321,000. We had a small increase in FY21, so it decreased in FY20 to 316,000. We had a little bit of an increase in FY21. We had a little bit of an add to the consultants line, and I have the full breakdown if you need it. However, then, as Clerk Semino noted, there was a 10% reduction, and that's where you really start to see the decline in the overall budget for the council. So between FY19 and today, we're down about 17% overall. Does that answer your question, Counselor?
Yes, it does. The next question is, do you have enough in this budget to pay for the things that this council requires?
For their needs, yes. For their wants, probably not.
Do you have an estimate for how many times you have had to ask other departments to cover our ad budget?
I do. About 8 different times I had them pay for our ads.
8 different times, and how many times do you have to buy the budgets? Like, what's the ratio of that to the total number of times you had to buy ad budgets?
I have right here, I can add it up for you.
That's fine. So the point that I'm making is
Yeah.
we've had many cuts, no increases. I mean, there was a minor increase between 2020 and 2021. And then now we're actually being subsidized by other departments for a legally required expense. So these cuts are unsustainable and unfair to other departments and not in the best interest of Braintree's residents who need the town council to be funded to fulfill the parameters set forward in the charter. You do an excellent job stewarding the limited resources that you are given, and I deeply appreciate your efforts. That's all I have for questions.
Thank you, Council Flaherty. Council Maglio, questions or comments, please?
Yes, I would like to go even a little further than Councillor Flaherty's comments, and I'd like to say that when I see cuts like this to the town council, and I see cuts to the clerk's office, I think about democracy and that this is undemocratic. We are hoping in some ways that there isn't a primary because it will save money. And that's not the purpose of voting. That's not the purpose of elections, of how governments run, of how people are able to participate in a free society, is to hope that there's no competition so that we can afford to have an election, to hope that there aren't too many items so that we have to go with another ballot because we can't afford that. And then this body that is supposed to partner with the mayor, that we are to work together, but we are also a system of checks and balance. And there's 9 of us and we're all volunteers and we have 1 staff person. And we may need to figure out how to fund our own trips to volunteer to attend the Mass Municipal Association's events, which are so vital and so important and have so much information for local governments and bodies across the state. And we're lucky if we get a $50 ticket paid for once throughout the entire year. And the fact is, we don't take this on because we're looking to be sent to conferences. We take this on because we feel like we have a contribution to make, and to the extent that we can make it with being able to make enough Xerox copies and being able to have an iPad that is within recent years of technology, or to be able to have, I don't know how you get a phone for $600. You're clearly subsidizing part of that yourself. And so all of this to me is deeply disturbing and unsettling, that we are literally counting out how many ads, because if we have too many ordinances, we won't be able to afford the legal notices. And that people should be very aware of and very disturbed by, and need to plug in and get involved in this process that we call democracy. So, sorry, Clerk Semino, you are doing an amazing job dealing this out with fewer and fewer things to deal. You're always accessible, you're always there, you always have the answer, and I appreciate that so very much. I don't know how you do it, and, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Council Maglio, very fast. I would have to concur with what you've had to say. It is a disturbing trend that an important element of our town government and a check and balance has been cut and cut and cut to the point where we are at bare bones. Our ability, we certainly are not looking for anything that is fluff, if you will, or nice to have. But it is a great illustration, again, for our revenue problems that we have as a town. Significantly a problem we have for revenues in this town. And, you know, the council does not have a big say in the policies or the generation of how this town can generate more in terms of revenues. And eyes and ears need to be opened up, minds need to be opened up to just saying no to some pretty obvious opportunities for us to address our needs without sacrificing, which I hear a lot of, Braintree's character. Braintree's character has changed dramatically over 370-something years, constantly changing into the future. And to try to stick a stake in the ground and say, we're not going to move because we don't want to, well, now we see what that kind of an attitude has given this town and what a very steep hole we find ourselves in. Councilor Maglio spoke about democracy. I'd speak also about the types of services we've grown to expect. We've had a free ride in a lot of different aspects in this town, and it's the free ride's over. We need revenues. Otherwise, we need to cut. So it's a great illustration here of the co-body of our democratic government at the municipal level being severely underfunded. And so I just have a few questions, just to help me clarify a little bit about our inability to really do our job at a basic level, or at least the incredible effort by our one full-time person who does an Herculean effort of making sure that democracy is alive and well, particularly from the council's perspective in the job that we are charged to do. That cell phone, it is amazing. I'd love to find out how one cell phone line item of $600 can last a year. The technology, essentially we have, last year we had $200 for technology. Is there any way, Clerk Semina, you could tell me what was that $200 applied to?
So we didn't use all the technology, I don't believe, last year. No. I think we did need to purchase a new charger for an iPad.
A charger for an iPad.
So that was what we used it for one time.
Good times,
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. Okay, I mean, I'm not looking for the sexy, state-of-the-art equipment. I'm looking for very basic equipment that's going to allow us to do our job in an efficient and reliable manner. So, what else do we have here? Office supplies, we've been cut again, down to $1,300. Down to $1,200 from $1,300. Did we use that entire? Well, we're still working our way through another month and a half of the fiscal year. Is there any balance left in that office supply?
We do still have some left. I know that the fiscal year previous, I tried to order my printer cartridges, so I knew I had them, just in case we were cutting the budget. So I try and have but they've gotten a lot more expensive. They used to be maybe $300, now they're about $600.
Right.
Like everything, cost goes up.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. I mean, we do see the dues membership has gone up 25% from $1,800 to $2,250. I'm assuming that's an increase to our Mass Municipal. And
So that's just to cover anyone that wants to register for the MMA.
Right, and we know the importance of MMA from a council standpoint. It's our opportunity to see what MMA is providing in terms of services for our membership as a community, what best practices are being applied, and how we can bring those practices here to Braintree to have a more robust and efficient government. So, one thing that I know this has been a topic of discussion amongst counselors, and really less so, I think, at a public level, but it is an expense and it's a cost, and I think there could be an argument made for it, is that at a minimum, the council having its ability to employ its own legal services. We're not asking for a full-time person, but just to have a legal, our own legal services that, from my perspective, I have seen one particular case in the time that I've been on this council, where there could have been a question of some conflict of interest on the council relying on the mayor's town solicitor. Not to say that anything was done in bad faith, that's not what I'm saying at all, but just from a perspective of, again, a balanced and a check and balance, I should say, of the council to have its own legal advice in the event that the council and the mayor's office have a difference of opinion. And for us to have to rely on the same counsel that is providing counsel to the executive branch, to me, doesn't really meet that need of the council. So that's something in the future that I would like to see us take a look at. And again, I know we're being asked to cut our budgets. Now, just from a hypothetical situation, if the town council were to say, we can't adhere to that guidance from the mayor to cut, and instead say, we want more money for X amount, does that get into the budget, or is that a veto of some type, or does the mayor's executive authority supersede our authority to request?
I believe if the council submitted a budget that was higher than the mayor had recommended, it would be reviewed, and we would sit with the department and go over the specific lines, specific items that...
But would the final arbiter be the executive branch? To say, sorry, we're not going to buy this, and you still have to cut.
I believe according to the charter, it's up to the mayor to present the final budget to the council for their review.
Understood, but this still doesn't give me any clarity. There's a reconcilement between that statement of what the charter says, that the mayor has the ability, or it is the mayor's responsibility to submit a budget on behalf of the entire town, but where does the authority, the autonomy of the council stand in terms of that type of a charter statement? And essentially, we're under the control of the executive branch if the mayor has the final authority.
The mayor presents a balanced budget to you. You can accept it, reject it, or reduce it. That's my understanding of
Well, the way you say
what
it,
the charter reads.
Right, the way that you say it that way, to present a balanced budget, if I was to say, if the mayor says, well, you can't have any more than X amount, and we say we want Y amount, because we really feel we need that, the mayor doesn't have to submit it based on that answer, and I understand your answer there. Okay, so maybe that's a charter item. That's something that we can look at. Council President, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, and, thank you to Clerk Semino for all of her guidance, but, the president's responsible for the town council budget. I took the charge seriously from the mayor's office, knowing that our entire town's financial situation is grave. And and I've talked to counselors about wanting everything from a hotel room for a conference to an attorney or access to our own attorney, as you just discussed, and again, knowing the situation of the entire town's budget, I could not present anything higher when we know the situation that especially our school system is facing, and it's not a trade-off any department wants to make, but here we are. So I understand everybody's frustration, and this was an exercise of a lot of hand-wringing and nail-biting, because we are an extension of the community, and we do our work on behalf of the residents. And if we don't have the basic tools to do our job, we are doing a disservice to the residents. So what I presented was the very best I could do to feel like we had enough to do right by the residents, knowing how hard all the 9 of us work, and I had Clerk Semino for 10, while living within our financial means with what we have today.
Madam President, you're in a tough situation, absolutely, and I appreciate everything that you've done for this council over the last 16 months or 17 months, 17 months. And as a hypothetical, and I certainly apologize if I didn't want to put you on the spot, but it was your answer was really insightful to add to our perspectives that we've shared already here. And that, yes, the council really does its job in helping out, everyone pitching in and doing their part. But I think there has to be some consideration, reciprocal consideration to the council for all the work that it has done to chip in and to cut its budget, and that, to the point of Councilor Maglio's, how does that actually affect our ability to represent the democratic principles and checks and balances in our town? And to your point, very grave situation we find and it emanates across all aspects of our community, in particular our government, and this is just another discussion point. Yes, go right ahead, Chief of Staff LaForest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the committee. So you will see in tomorrow night's legal budget, under when Crystal comes before you and presents her budget, that she has secondary legal services, right? She's able to handle a lot of our legal services in-house, but there are times we need outside counsel. And to your point, and there could be opportunities, and I acknowledge this, having been on your side of the well, that if there were a conflict to arise where the council would need legal services external to the town, to the mayor's office, if something were to arise, it could be served through that line item.
So that's a future consideration for us if we do find that situation.
And I think it's more situational than a full-time legal counsel typically across communities. And I must take this opportunity, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to commend Sue Semino. What a superstar you have. What a superstar, really. She has been, all of your comments, how responsive she has been, how she manages all the balls in the air. Truly, each department that you're bringing before us, you've got great heart and grit and giving their all for the best of the community. So you have a great partner there. And I do recognize all of the work and time it takes for each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your thoughts and comments. Yes, I have Councilor Flaherty recognized.
I wanted to add to Chief of Staff LaForest's comments about the legal line item that we might avail ourselves of if necessary. That's good to know, but we could only avail ourselves of it by the mayor's will and not because we thought we needed to. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Maglio.
Thank you, and I was actually just going to add another little comment on there as well. I'm excited to see, we have the information, but I'm excited to hear about how the solicitor will will be working now that there has been a significant change. And I think that's the part for anyone listening who is who might be confused about this. The previous chief of staff was also the solicitor. So when going for a legal opinion, we weren't, it's hard to know if it's coming from the chief of staff, or is it coming from the solicitor, is it coming from the mayor? And I think that led to a lot of complications. I think that led to a lot of, I think it led to some delays. I think it led to some times where wanting to seek outside legal information was pretty critical, and yet not really having the ability to do that. I think that the change now, and this change of having, please tell us you're not going to law school. Please tell us that your role is going to be chief of staff and operations, and that there will continue to be some sort of separation between the chief of staff and the solicitor role.
Well, I'll tell you, if you surveyed a lot of people that know me, they would tell you that I'm an attorney. So I have not gone to law school. I'm not planning to go to law school. But there would be a super majority of people who would tell you that I am an attorney. So my role here at the town of Braintree is chief of staff and director of operations. But yes, I have a bit of a legal mind.
Legal mind, but you're not here as an attorney?
No, I am not.
Okay.
All right.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything further from any of the council members? All right. Nope. Okay, so anything further from Clerk Semino?
No, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes our review of budget matters this evening. And with that, we are looking to table Order 23025 to May 9th, tomorrow evening, 2023.
Motion to table Order 23025 to May 9th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so that is unanimous. Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening, let's see.
No more discussion on any other orders this evening.
There will be no discussion?
No discussion.
Okay,
We can just go right to adjournment.
All right.
Could I ask a question about the schedule? Should that be
Absolutely.
after or before adjourn?
I have a couple questions on the schedule as well, so let's
Okay.
talk after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there anything further from the Chief of Staff?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and the Finance Director, sir.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I appreciate both of you being here this evening. And we appreciate the help of BCAM once more. And so with that, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.